How about another PC build? Doesn't hurt, right? This here is the Radeon RX 7900 XT. It's not the XTX for reasons we'll talk about later in the video, but I plan to use this in one of the most powerful AMD rigs I've ever assembled, featuring as well their 7950X. So I'm not going with the 7900X because that would be way too confusing, right? 7900 XT, 7900X, the naming scheme. Oh my gosh, come on AMD, make it a little easier on us, please. So this thing is an absolute slayer of all. The 7950X comes with 16 cores, 32 threads, super high frequencies, including bass frequencies. And well, yeah, she's a bit power hungry. She does run a bit hot as well. AMD's like, it's okay that it hits T-junction. That's perfectly normal. As for the remaining components, pretty much all Corsair. This video's sponsor, with the exception of this Gigabyte motherboard. This is an X670E Aorus Master, and it's an absolute beast waiting to satisfy your AM5 needs. You can find all these parts, by the way, linked in the video description if you are interested in building something similar to this. This is an this is a Corsair iQ 220T, and this is one of my favorite mid-towers of pretty much all time. It's very compact, it has great airflow, it comes with 3, I believe, ARGB fans, just all around an excellent case. They did a great job with it. The H150i Elite LCD is going to have a baked-in LCD screen over the CPU block for some tinkering there if you want to show system stats and the like. We've got an MP600 Pro XT, 1TB variant, Gen 4 speeds. Reads are up to, I think, 7,100 megabytes per second sequential. That's insanely fast. We have 32 gigs of DDR5 Vengeance RGB modules here and an RM850X power supply. You have no idea how many takes this took. Finally nailed it. I'm so happy. So with all that out of the way, I hope you will stick around for the ride. This will be worth the wait. Trust me, this rig's gonna look super cool. Aesthetically, it's gonna be awesome, but also it's gonna be a great performer. And we're gonna run a few tests at the end of this to see how it stacks up against the Intel/NVIDIA counterpart that you could build for around the same price. Are you ready? Stay with me. To get rid of that annoying Windows activation watermark, head on over to VIP SCD Key. Purchase a Windows 10 Pro OEM key for a fraction of the price of retail. Just use a secure payment method like PayPal, enter your product key into your PC settings window, and say bye-bye to the watermark. And be sure to use our offer code SKGS for a sweet discount. Let's kick things off straight away then with platform assembly. For that, we're going to need, obviously, our CPU. We're going to need our DDR5 system RAM. We're going to need our NVMe. This is going in the motherboard, and we're going to need that motherboard. Take a moment, if you would, to just enjoy the sheer beauty of this motherboard. It is a bit larger than your standard ATX board, at least width-wise, so do mind that for some of your smaller cases. I think this will still fit in the 220T, though. If it doesn't, I'm gonna look pretty stupid. We can meet our 7950X for the first time. Note that the pins are no longer on the back of the chip. We've switched to LGA, which means the pins are actually in the socket of the motherboard now. We're gonna pull up on this lever and then pull the cover back. Wow, looks oddly familiar, almost like a Team Blue board. Drop the CPU in very carefully, lower the retention arm, and then we'll take this plastic cover, save it for later. Check out how sexy these Corsair Vengeance DDR5 modules are. Chef's kiss. We're gonna populate slots 2 and 4. Remember, this is DDR5, not DDR4, and no, you don't get a choice with AM5. You have to opt for DDR5. And prices are starting to level out, not as cheap as DDR4, but much closer than we started. Wow, this is a beefy M.2 heatsink if I've ever seen one. It's not like a solid slab of copper or anything, so it's not super heavy, but she's, yeah, definitely more dense than the status quo. And we can connect it to this board straight up without using the included motherboard heatsink here. I think this is gonna do a good enough job as is. Totally toolless install, by the way, which is nice on this board. And with early mounting gear for our AIO installed, it's time to marry our platform to our case, and holy cow, this is a tight fit. This is what I wanted. I wanted it to be compact, so just know that going into it with a 220T, it's really one of the only trade-offs, but I think it's a worthy one. We've got, yep, it fits. It fits barely. The board is literally resting on these rubber grommets. We might need to remove these grommets. Not a big deal though, because the board's covering half of these holes. I just think it looks so cool when a motherboard takes up this much space in a case. And there's like very little dead space to the right of the board when looking at it from the left. We're obviously gonna have our 360mm AIO mounted up front, the radiator portion at least, with the fans. So that'll fill up what little space remains here. The card is pretty much gonna be the extent of the case depth, front to back. It's gonna be a tight fit, but it's gonna look pretty cool. At least that's what I'm hoping happens. We're gonna remove this hard drive cage because, well, we don't need it and we need to make space for that 360mm AIO. Come on, get on out of here. There we go. Look at all that empty space. So much room for activities now. Okay, now we've got the fan there. We'll have to get the other two fans in here as well. And then we can sandwich this radiator on the other side of them and then start screwing them in from the front. So only one set of screws to lock everything in. Should look super clean. All right, and that'll just about do it. What I really like about this case is that Corsair cuts out these little semicircular shapes into the fan frames up front so that there aren't any little bits and pieces of the frame blocking these fans from pulling in air from the front. We'll get this block situated, or well, half the block. Don't worry, pre-applied thermal paste, pre-applied thermal paste is already there. We've got couple of thumb screws to take care of, actually 4 of them. And what I did with the tubing here is just kind of run it up the top. I don't like to have the tubing exposed if possible. It keeps things out of the way of our graphics card as well for later. Also, yeah, the screen part of this AIO is totally removable and it's under my camera tripod. There we go. So when we want to connect this, it just slots right in like so, and then we can wire this stuff behind the motherboard tray. So now, so far, looking pretty clean in there. It does look a bit rough behind the motherboard tray, but we'll tackle that in a second. And next up is the power supply, which is down here. It's kind of a mess right now. Here she is with everything wired up that we're gonna need, and we're just gonna install it behind the motherboard tray. It's gonna be, gonna be a bit tight. All the cables that we've already got pre-run, but she'll snugly fit there, and then we'll tighten things up from the rear. Now we can start cable managing this rat's nest right here. And yeah, this is gonna take a while. Jeremy, can we go ahead and throw up that SpongeBob time card? A few moments later. Please don't make this awkward, please. Jeremy, I swear I'm this close. A few moments later. All right, and yeah, about a good 20-25 minutes later. I'm not ashamed of it. It takes time to make this stuff look good. It's not, you know, it's not my best work, but we used a ton of zip ties. Corsair includes a lot of those in the box of the 220T, which is nice. And you know, we've got cable extensions as well. These are really cool. I like that they have subtle red accents in them, and that's gonna fit the AMD theme overall, so really cool. We have so many extra cables from all the RGB in here. This big old box here, the commander for the radiator. It also allows us to control the CPU block. This wires directly into the motherboard, and of course you get extra ports for your RGB, as well as just fan power on the left. So yeah, a lot went into this. It's definitely not easy with all the RGB and AIO support, but it looks pretty darn cool. The last major piece of the puzzle then is the Radeon RX 7900 XT. This thing is an absolute beast. I also love that it only requires 2 8-pins, none of that weird connector crap that you have to deal with from NVIDIA. Also, the card looks pretty darn cool. Now, if my calculations were correct, this should, in theory, fit perfectly. Oh my gosh, look at that. She does fit just perfectly. That is, wow, that's really something. I'm gonna move this cable over just a tad because it is being crushed by this card. I don't really have much of a choice though, because of the direction that the cable is pointing. There we go. Is the card slotted all the way in? Yep. Okay, and now we can just screw it down. And oh my, I love the way that these custom cables look with this card. Everything in here is pretty much like a dark gray or a black, with the exception of these cables. And I think they just make the whole build pop. Again, love that they fit the AMD theme more or less. Overall, looking pretty clean. All right, and would you look at this? Pretty darn good looking, I'd say, for an all AMD system with predominantly Corsair components, Corsair peripherals. It's a pretty sweet combination. And again, I love how compact this whole rig is. The card fits perfectly. I tried doing some rough estimations in my head, trying to budget enough space for this graphics card. Unfortunately, the 7900 XTX wouldn't fit, as it's just slightly longer than the reference 7900 XT. So we had to go with this. Yeah, I think it would be it's just way too close as is. So, it's still a very powerful rig. And the very next thing I want to do is power it on and run a couple of tests. I'm going to start with Cinebench, and then we'll move over to 3D Mark TimeSpy and see how this system stacks up to, again, that Intel/NVIDIA equivalent, namely a 13900K and an RTX 4080. So let's kick things off then with Cinebench R23. This is the exact same test I ran right after converting my personal editing rig and gaming rig to the Core i9 13900K. So you'll see here that, well, there's a ton of threads working to render this image. That's super cool. Of course, this is going to benefit from more threads, and even very slow Xeons back in the day with low frequencies did well on this test because they had so much parallelization. The 7950X actually did really well. It only barely lost to the 13900K stock for stock, which I think is pretty darn good. Next on the agenda was stacking two systems up pound for pound that are pretty much polar opposites of each other in terms of the manufacturer. So of course we have our all-AMD system here, which did take a bit of tweaking to get right. We had to update the BIOS. This Gigabyte board was not liking the fact that we had two DIMMs in here, and half the time it wasn't even posting when it was trying to train memory. So we did have to do that, and a couple other just housekeeping things to get it working the way that we wanted for these tests. The 3D Mark TimeSpy results that you're about to see, and I want you to bear in mind here, this is just one particular set of tests. This will be game dependent for sure. Some games will be better optimized for Team Red, some better for Team Green and Team Blue. But I will say that this is a pretty sweet option, especially considering the fact that this card is much more, I think, usable because of its two native PCI supplemental connectors instead of the craziness that we've got with the newer Ada Lovelace NVIDIA stuff. The 4080 also barely fit in my rig, whereas this one is much more compact, so I think it's a more universal fitment. All around, this system barely lost to that 13900K RTX 4080 combo. I mean, we're talking within 1,000 points here or there, but we were well above 20,000 altogether. That put both of these systems into the 99th percentile, meaning that these systems scored better than 99% of all submitted results in this TimeSpy 1440p benchmark. That's pretty darn good. And when you're talking about a plus or minus 5% or less delta in terms of just sheer performance outright, because we know that the CPU's already trade blows, and the 7900 XT is a pretty close competitor to the 4080, although the XTX definitely would have been the better choice here. So not necessarily the fairest comparison. Still, this is the cheaper card. So the value, I think, is on this side in terms of what you're getting for your money. The 4080s are still pretty expensive, especially when you look at AIB cards. This is a reference model here, so it's not going to be as expensive, I imagine, as some of the larger triple slot cards that you're going to find from AIBs on AMD's side. But yeah, I think given the trade-offs of this card not being as powerful as maybe the 4080, it still does a lot given its size and its price. Is it my first choice? Probably not. Is the price superb? No, it's really not, in my opinion. None of the new cards are really priced all that competitively, I think. But it's just a sign of the times, inflation, and all that other stuff that's starting to catch up to us. I don't want to say the better buy either, because again, this is just one test. But one thing is for sure, whether you go the all-AMD route or not, the new stuff is freaking powerful. It really is. It's on another level. And yeah, you're gonna pay for it, but golly, do games look good on this machine. With that, if you enjoyed watching this system being built, let me know in the comment section below. I want to give big thanks to Corsair again for sending out a lot of this hardware, for arranging this entire build for us. It was actually supposed to be a different project, and it ended up getting delayed, and just a bunch of other things happened. And I'm very grateful that Corsair was flexible with us here. I said, why don't just throw together like an all Corsair PC and maybe top on some of the newer tech for size as well, like the two AMD components in here. And they were all for it. So show them some love. Be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Let us know in the comment section below what you think. And remember, you can find all these parts in the video description if you want to build something just like this. My name is Greg. Thanks for building with me.